Hey guys, from time to time I'm going to be reading from our number one best-selling book, stories about people that'll just blow your mind. The one coming up is Scarlett Lewis, probably one of the most profound teachers that I have ever run into in the area of forgiveness. You may know the story. I'm going to read it right from the book. As a matter of fact, the book that I'm talking about is our number one bestseller, Positive Thinking Will Never Change Your Life, but this book will. The Myth of Positive Thinking, the Reality of Success. And when I first heard about Scarlett Lewis and what she went through and how she had recovered from it, I was absolutely mind blown. I couldn't believe it. I said, I've got to talk to this woman. I've got to get her on the air on my national radio show and interview her, and I did. And after I interviewed her a couple times, I said, honey, you've got to be a part of this book. This story is striking. And I'm just going to read right from the book, and you can hear my words first and then Scarlett's words, and it's going to move you. It's going to move you to take action, to forgive people from the past that have hurt you. Deeply hurt you, so that you can be free, so you don't carry the resentment and grudges forward. We don't forgive people to let them off the hook. We forgive them to let ourselves off the hook of resentment. Scarlett Lewis, I began, is one of the most beautiful, compassionate, and forgiving people I've ever had the pleasure of speaking with. I've interviewed her several times on my national radio show and wanted so desperately for her to be part of this book. Like Diane Gray, who you've read about earlier, Scarlett Lewis has faced the loss of a child in one of the most horrific ways imaginable. She has used surrender to the reality of what happened as an action step to go out into this world and make a difference, even after losing a young son. The massacre at Sandyhook Elementary School was being reported on national news. I was filled with the most incredible sense of loss, even though I didn't personally know anyone there. For Scarlett Lewis, it was a different story. Her young son, Jesse, had left the morning for school filled with vibrancy of life. As Scarlett and her son, JT, would tell me during separate interviews on my radio show, young Jesse was filled with the spirit of joy. Everyone fed off his infectious happiness, but this day would be different. Jesse would not return home. I still get emotional reading this. Here is Scarlett's stories. She is so profoundly powerful, being able to come back from this tragedy while trying to make some sense out of it, and then using this horrific act to help heal the world. Now this is Scarlett speaking in her own words. I have always been a glass half full type of person. I believe this has helped my ability to alter my perspective in certain circumstances and to have a more optimistic outlook. When my 6-year-old son was murdered in his first grade classroom, however, positivity was not going to be enough to get me through the trenches of shock, trauma, and mourning, especially when people around me were using positivity in order to avoid being present with me in my pain and to ease their own discomfort. And this is very common. You know, things will get better, everything happens for a reason. All those positive statements are horrendous when it comes to healing from grief or guilt or shame or resentment or any emotion whatsoever, which is the reason I wrote this book. She goes on, you had 6 years to love him, quote. He is in a much better place, quote. God wanted another angel, quote. See, these are well-meaning statements that are horrendous. This is where positive thinking actually holds us back in the healing process of life. These seemingly supportive statements, Scarlett goes on to say, actually turned me off to positivity during my grieving. There was nothing good about having my son brutally murdered along 19 of his classmates and 6 teachers and administrators in one of the worst school shootings in U.S. history. There was no way around the suffering for me. I was experiencing trauma and grief and soon learned that the two are separate and distinct. I was open to many different modalities of treatment and tried them all, from craniosacral therapy, EMDR, MNRI, brain spotting, Reiki, massage, hypnosis, and traditional talk therapy. I practiced mindfulness, meditation, and prayer. I learned that trauma can be treated and you can recover. Grief is a natural consequence of loss, and I began to understand that dealing with it would be more of a process than a specific treatment. I learned to lean into my emotions rather than avoid them and realized this would become a way of life rather than recuperation. Now listen to what she said. This is crucial. She leaned into her emotions, her anger, her sadness, her grief. All of it she went into versus away from. Thus, by embracing the pain, I uncovered a lot about myself, my limits, values, and inner strengths. The silver lining in tragedy is that it has inspired tremendous growth in me. It is through my journey of pain and suffering that I expanded and gained wisdom, found joy again, and even discovered my mission in life. I had originally wanted to go around my grief over, under, anything but walking directly through the fire. But it was in the pilgrimage that I found salvation. Had I been able to escape or even fast forward through the extreme discomfort, I wouldn't have cultivated the strength that feeds the resilience that allows me to utilize my experience to be instrumental in creating a worldwide movement to choose love. I have learned that it is suffering that unites humanity, not the other way around. Everyone suffers to some degree. And interestingly, it is those who have suffered that have the courage to be present in my pain. It is through this authentic connection that hearts unite. If we could get from point A to point B without discomfort, then there would be no impetus for growth. Isn't that powerful to hear? Progress and maturation come through tribulation. Thus, the key is to embrace hardship. Ask what lessons you can learn, and acknowledge this germination period as a process of blossoming. She is profound. She is absolutely profound. Scarlett Lewis is one of the most amazing people I've ever had a chance to say is an acquaintance, is a friend, is someone very, very dear to me. And her teachings are altering the way that we look at forgiveness in the world and the way that we choose love over hate and everything else in its path. Check out Scarlett Lewis. Google her on the internet. You're going to find some amazing stuff about her, and I'm so proud to have her in the book. If I can help you at all, email me at talkdavid.com. I know grief is not something that people want to talk about, sadness, rage, anger, resentment, but in my work as a counselor and a life coach for 26 years, it's what we do. Find out more about Scarlett Lewis. Google her. She's a pure soul of light. And if I can help you at all, again, it's talkdavid.com. Have a beautiful day.